Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's Customer Success Office Hours. My name, as ever, is Will Rodbard, and I have a number of colleagues joining me online today. Let's see who we've got. We have Asaf, Demarcus, Prasanna, Ricky, and Zach so far, and a number of other colleagues are online too. We have Jeremy and Renee Francois as attendees. I'm just going to check Twitch land to see if we have anybody on there yet. Nobody live just yet, but I've no doubt somebody will join in later on. Hi, Amy and Vance, thanks for joining. So, it's the 28th of January. This will be the last Customer Success Office Hours chat of the month. And as per usual, what we will do is we'll have a very quick look at the release notes to see if any patches or anything have been dropped in. And then I've got a couple of conversational topics to start us off with. And as per usual, feel free to jump in on any of the chat boxes, whether it be Twitch or Zoom, or if you're watching this on YouTube later on, please feel free to drop any questions in there or any subjects you'd like us to cover later on. Right, so without further ado, what I'll do is just open up the release notes for this month. See if anything has dropped since the last big one, since version 1.9 dropped. No, nothing new since last week, which we briefly covered. Let's have a look here. There's nothing else in there that's new. Nope. Okay, so what I wanted to do is we had a couple of questions come through from the customer success managers. Basically, they've been talking to their customers, and they've got a couple of as kind of standard areas they want to discuss, so they've brought those up. And then you guys on online as attendees or panelists, feel free to jump in. In fact, I'm going to be asking you questions, so and for your advice and your guidance on this one. So first of all, a couple of things we've had a few queries about from customers, and that's around HCX, primarily on upgrading HCX. We've had a few customers have issues with this, and they're looking for guidance on how to best approach the HCX upgrades. So I thought we'd cover that, and then also a couple of issues have come along where people, things to consider when making network changes on-prem once you've connected your SDDCs back onto on-prem. So things to think about, consider, don't do, that sort of thing. So let's just drop straight into to HCX and start talking about sort of HCX planning. Now, there are kind of two scenarios to think about with HCX upgrades now. You have the very traditional HCX where you have an on-prem version, and then you have the cloud version. And the cloud version, as you can see on screen, is obviously configured and started off from within your VMware Cloud portal. And then you obviously jump to the HCX portal, and you can drop into your HCX console from there. And then from there, you can either view it from, once configured, you can view it from here, or you can view it from your vCenter server. Now, with the traditional deployment, you have an on-prem version of HCX, which once you've deployed or activated, shall we say, the SDDC variant, the VMware Cloud on AWS variant of HCX, you then download the components from here and then deploy the enterprise version on-prem. Now, the challenges come because we have an upgrade window, and everybody else online, keep me honest here, the kind of the upgrade cycle is about every 3 weeks, every 4 weeks for HCX. Somebody confirm, but it's really frequent anyway, and we only support back kind of N-3, I think, so current version and then 3 backwards. So theoretically, every 3 months you're going to have to perform an upgrade of your on-prem components as well as your cloud version. Okay, so anybody see any issues there off the bat? Anything that might be a challenge for people?
Yeah, I see an issue with people that have network extensions.
Yep.
When they do the upgrade, it kind of drops that tunnel, and they lose that connectivity for up to a minute, they say.
Yeah, good shout. So the appliances are they are like fast, quick boot appliances. So, but you're right, because there's only a single network extension appliance. If you upgrade or redeploy that, you're going to lose that connectivity, which is um, an issue, I guess, right? So it depends on your use case. It may be a bigger issue for you than others. With proximity, I'm going to call it routing, but for the Americans, proximity routing, which it really pains me to say, by the way. With that in place, that may relieve some of the headaches of losing that. But obviously, not all of them will go away. But yeah, you're right. Good point. Any other challenges with being forced to upgrade at that cycle, that sort of frequency rate? Okay, so if you think about a business, you think about even just a single enterprise, not even like a massive global company. How often do people tend to upgrade their environments traditionally? I'd say what, once a year maybe at best, maybe once every couple of years. Certainly not every 3 months for sure. Right, so
No.
we are kind of forcing a major change in behavior here, right? So that's one thing. So that's going to impact a company's change control process if migrating to the cloud hasn't already. So that's going to be a big impact. So any others? Anybody else got any other sort of areas of concern of forcing an upgrade? Well, I guess one of the other big ones is migration schedules, right? So when you think about planning your migration and your migration, say you've got a really tight timeline, but your migration might be running for 3 to 4 months. Well, immediately there you've got at least one upgrade that you're going to be forced to do in that migration window, right? So ongoing migrations are not going to work during that upgrade window. So you're going to have to plan that bit more a bit more cunningly than you may well have done before. So there's that. We obviously have like a DR sort of functionality within HCX and the replication that sits underneath. So the replications will carry on. So the VMs will replicate no matter what, but obviously no actual migration events can be occurring when you take HCX down. Okay. Um, so there's that. Anything else anybody can think of? Just gave you a moment there to find the mute buttons. Okay, so let's talk about upgrade sequencing. Okay, we know that when we deploy HCX, we are doing it from within here first, right? We're kind of opening HCX and we're then marking it as we're deploying it and then it's active. So we're clicking here, deploy HCX, and then once it's deployed and enabled here, we're then downloading the HCX Enterprise bits and then deploying that to OVF on-prem and setting it up that way, right? So natural assumption would then be to upgrade the cloud side first, correct? Good. Silence is
Does it
agreement.
upgrade when you do the maybe I forgot how it does the upgrade. I thought it upgraded the service mesh. Maybe not.
So when you do an upgrade, let's go into HCX and let's have a look at where you would find that sort of upgrade button. Okay, that might help visualize things. So
For the automatic upgrades, so a customer typically goes and updates the HCX managers on both sides,
exactly. So yeah,
practically starting
that's
with the cloud side and then to the on-prem.
absolutely good one. Good call, Prasanna. So you would log into I don't even know if this is the right password. Oh, cool. Interesting. Yes, exactly right. So we would go into here and you'd have had a banner notifying you at the top of the screen saying, there's an update available for HCX. You'd go into the system updates section and then you would click on download and update or just download only. And then you would update the manager and then you do the manager at the enterprise or the on-prem side. And then once they're both up to date, you would then do the service mesh, so redeploying or updating the appliances like the WAN up and the interconnect appliances. Now, is anybody aware of any steps you would have to do potentially before that? Okay, so there's one key thing that maybe some customers haven't done, which has led them into a bit of a hole. Okay, so if you have an issue with HCX, so something isn't working properly, the recommendation from us, from VMware, from support, from I guess probably in the documentation as well, is to make sure that everything is working before you do an update. So if you are scheduled to update and then you notice one of your connections is offline, it's down, you kind of need to fix that before you upgrade. I guess primarily because it'd be harder to troubleshoot and diagnose after the fact, right? But yeah, everything has to be in a healthy state before you upgrade, or you're going to end up in potentially a bigger world of hurt. And we've all seen issues with interconnect appliances not being online or whatever else, and imagine sort of trying to fault find that after you've upgraded as well. So it's going to be a tricky thing. So absolutely go through, double check the health status of all of your HCX setup before you try and upgrade, and then as Prasanna called out, do the online manager first and then the on-prem manager, and then we roll through everything in the service mesh, and we update the components within there, so depending on what you've actually deployed. Okay, so for example, the interconnects, but you only do the interconnect components, for example, after your site paired HCX managers are done. And sorry, somebody got a question? Nope, cool. So the service, so for example, we mentioned service down. So if you are you're interconnected, so I was hoping we'd have a broken one actually so we could see it. But yeah, so if your tunnel was down, for example, you'd absolutely want to find out why that was down before you did an upgrade, because it'd be tricky to diagnose afterwards. So you can redeploy these appliances in place, so you can kind of undeploy and redeploy them, and that will perform the upgrade for you once the manager is done, because it will pull the bits from there. Anything else from anybody on that one at all?
Yeah, on your point to check everything is fine. So generally, there is a banner in the top of this portal saying the HCX manager could not connect to the HCX service or something like that.
Yeah.
So I've seen that as a typical scenario where it leads into multiple issues. Now, the symptoms might be varied. Something else may not work properly, but if you look at the root cause, that banner in the top could be the culprit. So I would suggest to look at it first and resolve it. So the typical reason for that banner is when the on-prem HCX manager is not able to connect to the HCX service URL, which is connect.hcx.vmware.com.
Yeah.
It could be due to proxy or firewall or routing issues, but yeah, that's one of the frequent issues I've seen.
Correct. And actually talking about that, so that's the SaaS bit, the cloud SaaS bit of the HCX deployment, right? So there are two sides to that. You've got connect.hcx.vmware.com, and then you also have hybridity-depot.vmware.com, which is where the client systems download update files from. So depending on your configuration, you may need to just check your firewall rules and stuff in case there's problems there. Okay. Thanks for that, Prasanna. So just to recap, as we've said, make sure that everything's up and running and it's clean and everything's in a healthy state. Do the managers first, so download the bits for the cloud side and then the on-prem before you try and do anything else. Make sure there are no new migrations or any other projects running at that point that require HCX. I know that's an obvious one, but if you've got a large environment and you have multiple teams doing different things in the environment, you just have to make sure you cross all those teams and make sure they're aware that the connections will drop for some time whilst this is being updated. So as I also said, that ongoing syncs for DR are supported, so they will carry on because they're using a different technology, and make sure that you've got no planned failovers for that time. Again, I know it's an obvious one, but definitely worth calling out. Okay. Now, I can't remember. Ruth, was it yourself that had one or more customers that had an issue with HCX? Sorry to put you on the spot, but you're off mute, but I can't hear you.
Sorry.
Ah, there you
Yeah, so it was two separate customers, but similar issues. It was always when it came time to upgrade,
Yep.
and the issue was always for both customers, the issue was actually on the on-prem side, but there seemed to be confusion from the customer perspective. They thought that it was the VMC side, so then obviously that delayed some of the troubleshooting, but both customers, it actually ended up being issues with the on-prem side.
Fair enough. Are you aware of what those problems were? Was it config changes on their side, or
It was to do with versions. So as you were mentioning about how regularly we actually update it,
yeah?
one of the customers hadn't updated it in 9 months on their own side. So from a compatibility perspective, they were trying to go too far in one
Yeah,
go,
jump from one
basically.
version
Exactly.
to and
Yeah.
miss too many. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, thanks, Ruth. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that is worth calling out with everybody who has any customers, or if you are indeed a customer, you have HCX deployed. Your update frequency is going to have to increase dramatically to maintain supportability, I guess, of the product, and also upgradability. Like Ruth said, you can't jump from a really old to a really new version without step upgrading in between, I guess, which may or may not be possible. So yeah, there is that. Anybody got any other? They've seen any other challenges with sort of HCX upgrades or major major causes of issues within HCX that you want to bring up? Things we're on the subject already. Cool. Okay, again, HCX is amazing. No other problems ever found with it. Brilliant. I don't know if it was worth just having a quick sort of dive into the UI for those that may or may not have seen HCX before. I'm guessing everybody online and everybody watching this later on is familiar with what HCX is, but it is our tool for migrating into the cloud, for creating stretch layer 2 networks to the cloud, and also for providing kind of a DR functionality to the cloud as well. And there are a number of ways that we do this, but as you can see on screen now, we create a pair between our cloud and our corporate. Now we also have, as of the last release, the ability to do cloud to cloud migrations now as well. So by cloud to cloud, I mean say SDDC in VMC to another SDDC in VMC, which, as we've seen with some customers who have grown potentially unexpectedly fast, so they've consumed more resource than they initially thought they would, have sized their SDDCs maybe incorrectly for their growth plans, so they've had to create new SDDCs, and this is now a mechanism for migrating VMs from one SDDC to another, and really quick and easy. So all the config and stuff that you have to do on-prem to enable HCX and download the enterprise OVF and everything, all of that goes away with cloud to cloud. It's really, really simple. So you could theoretically, let's see how many of these we've got. Deploy, open. Okay, so we've only got one HCX live now. So if we deployed HCX in one of these others, we could create a new site pairing, and all we'd do is plug in the name of the other SDDC's HCX manager and click connect. And because it's in VMC and it's already deployed, it kind of knows everything that's in there really quickly. Apart from opening the firewall rules, there's not a huge amount left to do like you have to do for on-prem versions. So really quick and simple. A mechanism for potentially DRing from one SDDC to another, if you're not stretching your clusters possibly. So yeah, really cool. Once we've created the site pairing, we have this thing called a service mesh, and the service mesh is exactly what it sounds like. Here's all the services that we offer through HCX, and we configure these to work through the service mesh option, and we configure things like the compute profiles at the source and target, the networks available, the storage available at source and target, and where to move from one to another. So are there any questions from the attendees online now about HCX at all? Any use cases you've seen, or any challenges you've seen with this, or any advice you'd like to provide with it? Or panelists even, please feel free to jump in as well, guys.
This is Paul. Can
Hey,
you hear
Paul,
me?
how are you?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. I was just going to ask, it's been a long time for me back into HCX. I was just curious, like generally, how is the experience for people who are trying to install this? Have we gotten to the point where customers, for the most part, where the help that we provide, they can fairly do this autonomously almost, or is it still does your team have to get involved? How's the experience, I guess, for
Good
people who?
question. I think it's better now with the whole service mesh, multi-site service mesh setup, rather than the original stuff that you may see the difference in look and feel now. For me, I find it easy to use. I've got customers that even I guess if we're involved with them already, we're still going to help them out. We'll still be involved in their setup. However, those calls I feel take less time now. They kind of get it and they run through it reasonably quickly. I don't know about the other architects online if you're noticing the same, but I tend to find less time once you've talked about how it works and done sort of the upfront stuff. I find less time mucking about with HCX now than I did originally.
Great. That's obviously what we're hoping to do, right? The kind of the experience of using these things. We hope to
Yeah,
improve.
absolutely. And the docs are really good now as well. So if let me just open really quickly. Everything obviously lives in docs.vmware.com now. HCX is here. We everything about HCX resides in here. So for example, we talk about upgrading, or updating as it classes it here. It tells you a bit about the components, what needs to be updated, the update procedures. So doing the manager first and then the interconnect appliances, actually converting from legacy to the multi-site service mesh. So the thing I was just mentioning there, instead of having the interconnect, we now have this service mesh option, which is much cleaner. So here's the old interconnect sort of option. I mean, it doesn't look as good, does it, for starters? And then now we just have the service mesh, which has everything embedded in that. But yeah, the documentation is pretty good now. Originally, one of the guys on our team, Dustin, created a whole guide for how to set up and sort of background about HCX, which was really good. And we still point customers to, but I guess this documentation is pretty good now as well. So yeah, that's exactly what we want. We want everybody to be able to get online and consume this stuff as easily and as rapidly as they can, because then we're both happy, right? We're happy because you're using it, and you're happy because you're using it as well, I guess, and able to do what you want to do with it. But yeah, good question. Thanks, Paul. Anybody else got any questions at all? Cool. Okay. Thanks for that. So if there's nothing else on HCX, I did say I would talk about networking. It has the potential to drag on across many calls, but we've had a few things, a few scenarios or situations, should I say, where customers we talk to customers a lot about networking, about not overlapping subnets and setting up firewall rules and everything else, and creating their segments and stuff within their SDDC. But then often even ourselves, we're remiss in then reminding customers after the fact, every now and again, about changes that they make on-prem that can now affect this environment. So I guess at this stage now, customers are the scenario is a customer's set up, they're using VMC, they may or may not be stretching a layer 2 with HCX, they're running production workloads in it, and somebody comes along who's not in that team and makes a catastrophic change to the networking. So I guess obvious ones, just like the challenges we have when setting up VMC in the first place, things like changing firewall rules, and you kind of hope with a lot of customers, change control will get in the way and stop them from making too many silly mistakes. But we see it all the time. We see people make errors where they just forget there's a component out there, and they do it even when you're not talking cloud. Somebody will do a switch port config change or something, and it'll block traffic that is required that they weren't aware of. So I guess one of the other ones is, and this is something we talk about initially on startup, is overlapping subnets. So when we talk to customers and they create their initial management side, and then they create segments, their network segments within VMC, we talk a lot about don't create networks that overlap. So no network in VMC really should overlap with a network that resides on-prem, and that makes sense, right? There's no you're doing that to save yourself a bit of a nightmare, and that's initially, right? And then the customer gets happy with this, they're working, they involve us less, they go away, and like I say, there are lots of more teams involved generally in a large enterprise than just the team working with VMC, just the administrators. So a network team may then potentially create a network that overlaps, and then that's going to cause them problems for routing problems if those networks are then broadcast out via BGP. So if they're advertised and then VMC picks it up, so you're going to cause all sorts of problems. Are there any challenges that anybody's seen or could think of that an on-prem change after the fact, after deploys happened, that could severely impact either the running VMC service or just generally a customer's ability to work as they have VMC up and running? Not to put you on the spot, Prasanna, but I know you've seen a load of network issues, and I'm guessing from at least one of our northern friends, you've probably seen quite a few as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking which one to pick actually. So
there's so many.
Yeah, maybe one from the network extension. We have to be quite careful whenever we are extending a network. So we have to make sure the prerequisites are met and all the recommended practices are followed. So the issue I had in mind was, so the customer basically had a flat VLAN.
Yeah.
For everything, like basically management, compute. So everything was on that flat network.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And the HCX appliances were deployed on that VLAN.
So they just had one VLAN on-prem, right? So everything was
basically just one VLAN. Okay. And so the appliances were deployed on that VLAN, and that single VLAN was also extended.
Wow.
Now, okay. In network extension, this is high no-no. Even with L2 VPN, NSX L2 VPN, we should never extend a network on which that appliance is residing. So it could cause looping, and it could bring down the whole network. So basically, that's what has happened for that customer. So
yeah, interesting actually. So yeah, brilliant. So I say brilliant, not brilliant at all. But so you've got a management network on-prem that everything sits in this one network, including the appliances that you deploy as part of HCX, and then the customer wants to be able to extend the network that their workload virtual machine sits on, forgetting completely that it's a flat network. They try and extend, and they get this mad loop happening, right? Yeah, good point. And I guess that serves initially and later down the line, right? So when we first set up stuff, we recommend having separate networks for management objects and workload objects, just like most people generally do have. But we do still come across quite a few with massive flat networks, just for either historic reasons or management simplicity. And yeah, definitely one to remember.
Yeah, there's another one which is called out in this page, to never extend the same VLAN more than once.
Yeah.
From the same target. So this could happen inadvertently. Let's say the customer has two different distributed vSwitches, and they have the VLAN configured on both these DVS, and now they are extending from both the DVS but the same VLAN. So that things like that could potentially cause looping, which should be avoided.
Yep, good shout. I guess looping is coming up as the biggest problem there with stretching networks, right? Anything else that you can imagine somebody might do on-prem that would affect their running service in VMC without when we're not talking sort of stretching networks, for example? I mean, the obvious one is somebody just shutting down firewalls or doing a bit of a firewall audit and then getting a bit sort of a bit happy with deleting rules and just blocking access. And it might not be necessarily blocking access to for running VMs, for example, but might be, is it port 5400 and port 500 for HCX? I think they were the two ports, weren't they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the VPN ports.
yeah,
45
absolutely, yeah. So yeah, if you're just blocking those for by mistake or yeah, anything like that, really. So I guess the point I'm making here is that just because it's a managed service and a huge portion of the maintenance of the platform is done for you, as anybody running the platform knows, you're still heavily involved in configuring and setting stuff up yourselves. All of this needs to go in your CMDB, your config management database, just like any other set of servers would be in one of your other data centers, right? So you might not be logging some of the same details, like hardware make and model and stuff like that, but definitely ports, open ports, networks that are being stretched, numbers of hosts, numbers of VMs, their locale where they're running, maybe in a more agile manner so that they can be updated more frequently if they're bouncing between on-prem and back to the cloud and stuff. But absolutely, you need to be cataloging these details so that everybody within your organization, in your IT teams, are aware of what's open, why it's open, what kind of connectivity. You got to remember, some of the people in your environment may have never heard of HCX or even VMC, so they don't know what it is, they don't know what purpose it's serving, so they see no need for the object to be open. And time again we see let's call them over efficient IT people closing access to things because they don't know what they are, which when you're stretching networks could be catastrophic to your business, right? So anything else anybody's seen that would be a bit horrific for people when they've changed from when they make a change on-prem to affect VMC? Let's see if anybody other than Prasanna is awake. No.
Yeah, just what you're saying, just anything like like routing changes. Like if you're advertising the default route and then somebody changes that or something, and it totally break your connectivity between
Yeah,
on-prem and
absolutely.
cloud.
Yeah, good shout there. So there's a couple of things there, right? So changing the default route, as it should be said, Zach, not route. Changing the default route on your firewalls could affect loads of things. Your what was the other thing you mentioned? Oh yes, so the number of sessions you advertise. For example, if you've got BGP configured and you are advertising, I don't know, 5, 10 sort of subnets, and you deploy a whole new set of subnets, you may encounter sort of config maximum limitations of AWS or of VMC or both. So it's worth noting that if you suddenly start advertising more sessions than VMC can handle, that some of the existing sessions may actually go into inactive state rather than active, which again may affect your running workloads there, your ability to route properly. A good shout. Anybody else? No, good. Okay. No, so any of the attendees, you guys are sitting there really nice and quietly. Thank you for that. But if you've got any questions or anything you've seen this week or last week, or you've come up on a previous call that you'd like to discuss, feel free. On that note, I do have to apologize to somebody who's watching on Twitch last week live. We had a bit of an issue with the chat session, and I missed the question until afterwards. And I did try and follow up, but I didn't get much of a response. But please, do feel free to chime in. Even just type a question if you don't really want to. If you don't want to talk, that's fine. I would like to go and do a bit of I always like to end with a round table with the architects. If nobody's got any questions, and this is where I take great pleasure by individually throwing each member of the team under the bus and randomly calling you out and asking you what you've been up to, and if there's anything you would like to share with the group. Now, I tend to go alphabetically, but I'm feeling extra malicious today, so I'm just going to randomly pick people. We've got a couple of new guys in the team, Asaf and Demarcus, who it is quite unfair of me to pick on them every time, because they are relatively new to the team, primarily sort of shadowing the other guys. So I'm going to jump straight to Ricky today and just ask what you've been up to, Ricky, and if you've seen anything cool or different, some new sort of use cases come up this week, or
not any real new use cases, just working with the customer now about a DR scenario. So pretty much deep diving in SRM.
Cool.
See how we can help them out with that.
So are they current SRM users and they're looking to employ SRM to VMC, or are they new to SRM?
No, they're current SRM users and they use it all over their on-prem environments, replicating between their different data centers. And now we're moving them out of a data center into VMC. So pretty much starting the whole process again. Can we import any of your recovery and protection groups for them? Do we be created? All the fun stuff.
Cool. So what's the answer to that question?
And that's what I'm still looking for, Will.
Cool. Fair enough.
But yeah.
So that'll be next week's topic. Then Ricky will present on
on SRM.
Yeah, why not? So we actually had maybe a couple of months back. Z House did a really good presentation on SRM to VMC, and that video sits up on YouTube. So if anybody is interested in taking a look, go and have a look on our YouTube channel. So it's VMware YouTube. It is now organized by whether it's a webinar or it's an office hours call, so it's slightly easier to find, and it is tagged with Z's name as well. I desperately want to call him Z House, but I don't think he'd like it. So cool, thanks Ricky. Zach,
no
anything you've seen, fella? Anything nice and cool you've been playing with in the last sort of 7 days?
Yeah, I was messing around the other day with the public IPs that you can assign. So in VMC, you can pull, it's at the bottom, public IP. So you can allocate a public IP, and then you can assign it to a virtual machine to do NAT.
Yeah.
But if you're advertising the direct if you're advertising the default route from DX or VPN, then this won't work because it will be asymmetric. So I tested it just to see. I opened it up and I was able to do a packet capture and see the incoming packets to the request. Like I said, I think I did SSH. But when it replies, it goes out the default route, which is over direct connect, so it just gets dumped. But if you really needed to access your VMs like through the public internet, and you didn't want to go through your corp network, because you don't want people from the internet getting access to your corporate network, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the most part. But so what you can do is you could actually set up like a load balancer on the connected VPC,
Yeah.
or even I think you could probably use Route 53, and set up like a DNS entry for your VM and connect to it from that side.
Cool. So so that'll be the topic that we'll go into in more detail in 2 weeks' time. So Zach will
Sure.
be doing a demo for us and just showing us a few. It's brilliant. This I'm going to do this every week. So yeah, thanks, Zach. That's interesting. So yeah, I guess it's a good shout about how you route that traffic back once it comes in to that public IP. So and there's a number of different ways you can do load balancing, right? I know Prasanna has shown us in previous weeks on the call a couple of different ways of doing using AWS native load balancers, either in connected VPCs or other. So that's cool. Asaf, you came off mute briefly there for a second. And I don't want to throw you under the bus, but it looked like you had a question or a point to raise, so I'm going to call you out now, mate. I'm afraid. And there we
Well, it was by mistake then.
go.
I have no questions or any points raised.
No
Just
worries.
on that, Will, as
Yeah.
well, I had a customer who had a little bit of confusion as to why they were showing so many Elastic IPs in the portal.
Yeah.
So just for customers to be aware as well that they can remove them themselves or they can release them, just as long as they're not part of, not being used by the VMC service management component. So they were able to actually release IPs that they weren't using. It was for HCX, but they weren't doing it over the internet. They were doing it on a private IP address.
Cool, good chat. You and Jeremy need to have a chat, Jeremy Pitts, because he literally posted about 2 minutes ago saying, speaking of EIPs, I've seen a lot of customer confusion around the expected number of EIPs they will see in their usage and bills. Can you quickly go over the typical number they would see per SDDC/host along with the HCX EIP usage? So it sounds like you're an expert in this, Ruth. Would you like to
Really
give
not.
it?
It was just basically, it was HCX.
Yeah.
So it was showing 3 that they couldn't really understand why they were there. And it was just from their own perspective. They were seeing it, like Jeremy saying, on the bill. So it was just for them to know where they could actually see it. So as you have on the screen here in the networking security tab and the public IPs, as soon as they actually were able to log in, they could deduce what it was attached to.
Gotcha.
So it made it a bit clearer for them. So that's probably the first place to check, just because they were fully aware then and then were able to release them.
Good shout. Does that kind of cover it for you, Jeremy, or do you want to go into in a bit more detail about EIPs?
Yeah, I mean, it does mostly. I just wanted to bring that to light because I've seen that with some of my customers. From what I've seen, the typical usage is about 5 EIPs per SDDC plus 1 EIP per host, and then HCX will use 3 or 4 itself. So when you get to the time to see usage or bill and you see a bunch of EIPs, if you've got a large environment, it's very possible you're going to see 40 plus of those listed. So just something to be aware of.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for that. So yeah, I'm sure it is documented somewhere now, and I was looking. I think when Ruth, when your one came up when you asked about it the other day, I think I had a look into it, and I seem to remember seeing some documentation along it where that calls out where they can find it. So I was just gonna quickly dig that up if I could, and then show everybody. But that'll be a little bit like radio silence for everybody whilst I look that up. So I won't do that now. So I will. I'll tag a note to that on YouTube, or if one of the other architects could find that and then just put it in chat for us, that'd be grand. Thanks, Jeremy, for raising that. Anybody else? Prasanna, I haven't called you out, although you've been very vocal this week. Thank you. Anything you've been working on for the last sort of week or two that is worth talking about, sharing?
And Prasanna actually helped me with this EIP question, so I give him the credit for it.
Yeah, I'll call out an HLM question that came up this week. But to add to Zach's point on advertising default route. So one other option is to advertise specific routes instead of default.
Yeah.
If they need the public access. So the number one reason I've seen customer doing that is for network security,
Sure.
to inspect the network traffic. But if they don't have a specific requirement like that, maybe they don't have to advertise default route. They can advertise specific routes and access the public IPs.
So you're saying most times you've seen it is when customers are shunting traffic off down a specific route to an IDS IPS appliance, maybe sitting in Amazon or in their
Even on-prem.
yeah, back
In
yeah.
fact, it's mostly on-prem from what I've seen.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think that's also the reason why we will not be able to access the vCenter and HCX using the public IPs if we advertise the default routes. So yeah, it's a consistent behavior.
So within here, when you mean when you change your IP from public to private and vice versa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we are advertising a default route, then this has to be a private IP.
Yeah.
So that they can be accessed through on-prem.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah. So on the HLM question, I think it's a fair request. So basically, the question is whether I can link all my vCenters within the SDDCs I manage.
Yeah.
So that it's easier to manage all the vCenters from a single pane. So that was the question. So the hybrid link mode we currently have is to link an on-prem vCenter with the cloud vCenter.
Yeah.
So before we had HLM, we had this enhanced link mode, but in enhanced link mode, there is just a single SSO domain in which all the vCenters are linked to. But since the SDDC vCenter is always going to be on a separate SSO domain,
correct. Yeah.
We prepared this new feature called a hybrid link mode, where two distinct SSO domains can link with each other and be managed from a single pane. So that's basically the idea. But yeah, so currently the feature is for linking an on-prem SSO domain and the cloud SSO domain. So that's a one-to-one mapping. We cannot have multiple vCenters linking with a single vCenter.
Sure.
But
So
the good news is we also, the feature to manage all the SDDC vCenters from a single logical pane seems to be in the roadmap. I just checked in our public roadmap site, and it was listed as planned. And I think it's only logical, right? Because we are seeing more and more customers scaling out with multiple SDDCs, and
yeah.
I think it's a good feature to have. I searched with the linked as a search term.
There we go.
Yeah, that one.
Cool. Okay. So yeah, still in planned, which means it's in there. We're aware of it. It's not kind of being developed right now, but yeah, it's in the plan. Cool. Thanks for that. Yeah, good point. So we actually just before this call actually had a call with a customer that was talking about sort of linking on-prem with their SDDC. So they, I guess, just hadn't looked at the documentation. So they were looking in, the configuration and how can they would look at Active Directory, and they were like, oh, no, I've got no privileges, because of the restricted privilege mode that we run for the cloud admin account. And they were saying, well, how on earth can I connect my on-prem and manage it the same way? So they just kind of missed this hybrid cloud link domain section. So there we go. Thanks, Ruth, for adding to the chat there. So just for everybody's benefit, to remove your elastic IPs that are not attached to the VMC service management components, you can remove them directly from the VMC portal under network security, public IPs, and then release IP. So just where we were looking before, we'll just close that down in the public IP section, you can literally select it and then release if they're not being used. Thank you, Ruth, for confirming. Right. Any other shouts from anybody? Any other questions? Any other points you want to raise? Nobody on Twitch. I'm making a point this week to double check my Twitch chat panel. Cool. Nothing in questions and answers here. Thank you, everybody, for joining this week. Some good chats about networking and HCX. I won't leave us on a failed screen. I'll switch there quickly. Thank you for joining. As ever, thanks all the panelists and the attendees. Same time next week, we will be on here. If you're watching on YouTube, this, as per normal, will be up there within the next 24 hours. So you're watching me 24 hours older than I was when I recorded it. And yeah, we'll catch you all again next week. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
So